America's long struggle for independence officially ended in 1783, when Congress approved a final peace treaty with Great Britain. But not only did the treaty grant independence, it also defined the boundaries of the new nation. The United States was now 3 times the size of the original 13 colonies. It stretched all the way to the Mississippi River, making it larger than most European nations. However, respected Americans, including Benjamin Franklin and James Madison, realized very early on that more than just land and independence would be needed in order for the young country to succeed. From 1781 to 1788, the states were very loosely united to one another by the terms of an agreement called the Articles of Confederation. Under this agreement, each state was allowed complete independence. Accordingly, the states acted as if they were separate countries. Each had its own money, its own laws, its own military forces, and its own taxes. Not only that, the states were competing with one another for the vast lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. At the same time, the national government could do very little to keep the country together, since it was forbidden to tax, to regulate trade, or interfere with the activities of the states. The Articles of Confederation had been adopted because Americans feared a strong national government. They believed it would be too much like being ruled by the king, and the states would end up losing the freedoms for which a war had just been fought. But by the mid-1780s, the ties between the states had grown so weak, it was clear that a strong national government had to be established, or the nation would soon fall apart. In May of 1787, delegates from every state except Rhode Island traveled to Philadelphia, to the old Pennsylvania State House, where the Declaration of Independence had been signed. This time, they came to participate in an extremely important meeting called the Constitutional Convention. Its purpose was to write a constitution for the United States, a document that would serve as the framework for a new national government. With George Washington in charge, 55 men were sworn to secrecy, and then they went to work. Here in this room, all summer long, the framers of the Constitution debated, discussed, argued, and compromised. And by mid-September, they were done. The Constitution of the United States begins with the sentence, or preamble, that clearly outlines the document's vision and purpose. Here is what it says. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Following the preamble, there are 6 topics, or articles, that explain how the new federal government and legal system will work. For example, Article 1 says that the power to make laws, all legislative powers, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Article 2 says that the power to lead and make important decisions, executive power, shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. Article 3 says that the power to make the most important legal judgments, the judicial power of the United States, shall be vested in one Supreme Court. Article 4 says full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. This means states have to respect each other's laws. Article 5 says that the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution. In other words, Congress can amend or change the Constitution if certain conditions are met. Article 6 says the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, meaning all laws and legal decisions made in the United States must be consistent with constitutional principles. Originally, guarantees of rights and freedoms were not included in the Constitution and were left up to the individual states. But this turned out to be a big mistake. That is why 10 amendments, called the Bill of Rights, were added to the Constitution within a few years of its ratification. These amendments guarantee the most basic American freedoms. Among the most familiar of them are the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom of the press, the right to a fair trial, the right to keep and bear arms, the right which forbids unreasonable searches and seizures, as well as excessive bails and punishments, and the right to petition the government in order to make changes in laws. Early in the 1790s, with its wonderful new Constitution and Bill of Rights in place, and with George Washington serving as president, there was nothing in the world like the United States of America. But even though it was truly unique back then, some of the best ideas used to create the American democracy had been borrowed from the past. For example, the idea of democracy, that is, a government of and for the people, was first tried in ancient Greece, in the city-state of Athens, about 2,500 years ago. In ancient Athens, there was no king. Instead, citizens served on a council where they made new laws and important decisions affecting their nation. The word democracy itself comes from the Greek language. It means rule by the people. When the framers of the Constitution planned the American Republic, they also looked back to ancient Rome, for they admired the well-balanced representative government that developed there during the historical period known as the Roman Republic. During this era, which began at the same time democracy was developing in Athens, Roman government had 3 branches. First, there was a Senate made up of respected statesmen. The Senate shared power with an assembly of elected representatives who served as the voice of the common people. The executive branch of their government was made up of 2 leaders who had the power to veto, that is, to overrule each other's decisions. In medieval England, in the year 1215, an important document called the Magna Carta was signed. The Magna Carta started an idea that eventually found its way into the American Constitution. That idea was the need to have a system of checks and balances on government power. Before the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, was signed, kings could simply do as they pleased without regard for anyone else's rights. But after the Magna Carta, kings had to obey feudal laws. They also had to share their power with the noble lords and be willing to discuss issues and work out solutions to problems with them. The Magna Carta soon led to the creation of England's Parliament, which is still one of the world's most successful institutions of government. In fact, the Congress of the United States was modeled after England's excellent parliamentary system. Back in 1620, the colonists who founded Plymouth Colony in New England came up with the first agreement for self-government ever used in America. This agreement, or compact, was written aboard the ship the Mayflower, even before the settlers came ashore. And so it is called the Mayflower Compact. By signing the compact, 41 men stated that they would form an organized government, a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation, in order to enact just and equal laws for the general good of the colony. Over time, villages all across New England used the same idea for self-government when they instituted town meetings to solve community problems. The framers of the Constitution were quite inspired by the long history of local self-government in America that began with the Mayflower Compact, and they wanted to make sure it continued. Like most Americans of their time, the framers of the Constitution were Christians. They believed in observing the Ten Commandments, and they trusted in the Bible. And even though they wanted separation of church and state and freedom of religion, it was impossible for the founders to ignore their own beliefs when they planned the new government. That is why Judeo-Christian values are so firmly embedded in the American Constitution. Examples of this include such things as the idea of tempering justice with mercy when it comes to punishment, and the idea that people are equal in the eyes of God and therefore deserve equal justice under the law. The Constitution of the United States was written around the end of the historical era known as the Age of Reason, which began around 1660. The Age of Reason was a time of tremendous achievements in science and mathematics, a time when philosophers encouraged people to abandon their old superstitious ways and use their ability to reason to solve both scientific and social problems. Most of the men who framed the Constitution, such as the great scientist-statesman Benjamin Franklin, were products of the Age of Reason. They shared a vision of America's future as a place where people would be improved through better education, tolerance, free speech, and a modern government based on the consent of the governed. As we have seen, the Constitution of the United States is an amazing document, written by men of great vision who saw it as a way to put some of history's best ideas to use. For the Constitution has provided America with a strong yet flexible framework of government that has allowed the nation to flourish in 4 different centuries. True or false? The Articles of Confederation gave the states less power than the federal government. True or false? Under the U.S. Constitution, the federal government has 4 main branches. True or false? The idea of having a Senate came from ancient Rome. True or false? The Magna Carta was intended to increase the power of kings. True or false? The Age of Reason was a time of great achievement in science and mathematics.